Okay, folks, welcome to the UK Rental Market Report. This is the Q3 of 2022, according to Zoopla. I've got Richard on the show today about this.
Afternoon, Jim. This is actually quite a good report. I've had a good look through, and it's got some interesting stats and things for us to cover today.
Yeah. So what we're going to be dealing with as well is we're going to be looking at the Fife market as well in comparison to this. And you're going to talk about that because obviously you're the letting, just to give you your official title, lettings director for Fife Properties, so you know where it is. Now, I'm going to quickly stick my jacket on because this white is putting my white balance out.
Is this the talking amongst yourselves thing?
I'll be like, no, you're all right. I'm just going to stick this on. There you go. Because see how my face changes. See how that?
Yeah, it does.
You can see me now, because that's what happens. The white balance goes out because of the camera and the lighting. So the lighting just goes out askew. So that's that done. So let's talk about this, Richard. Do you want to go over the executive summary?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it states in obviously the Zoopla market report here at the start in the summary it says that rental growth is close to peaking at 12.3% per annum, and average rents have risen by £115 per month, which is over the last year, and that is £1,000.51 over the last year, which is quite a lot.
But let's put this in context. This is over the rest of the UK, according to Zoopla. This isn't Fife as well.
No,
so
that's what just about the thing I was going to say is the Zoopla reports do obviously draw in for the whole of the UK. They concentrate quite a lot on London in comparison. So that's why we're going to break it down to Fife a wee bit as we go through, because it does go on to say London's rental growth at 17.8% is unsustainable and reflects a rebound in rents after a double-digit decline over the pandemic. And then rising rents are adding to the cost of living.
See that we sound right there?
Yep.
Where it says it's unsustainable, but it reflects a rebound in rents after a double-digit decline over the pandemic. So in isolation, 17.8% might look like a lot, but taken over a 5 or 10 year period, it actually smooths it out to not that very much, if not an increase at all.
Yeah, because obviously let's say that we had that double-digit decline over the pandemic, so it kind of like it's this swings and roundabouts type thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Rising rents are adding to the cost of living pressures, which is pushing renters to look for smaller homes. Demand for two-bedroom flats has increased. Now, I spoke to you about this the other day, just in conversation, and Karen and I, our lettings agent Karen, were speaking about the popularity of flats, and in particular 2- and 3-bedroom flats and apartments, what people refer to them as. So we have been seeing that. The shift to smaller homes is being reinforced by rising energy costs, as we'll all be aware, with gas needed to heat a purpose-built flat 40% lower than it is to heat a 3-bedroom house in comparison. Which is a big difference.
Do you foresee then, if you look at that, just that soundbite in itself, do you foresee possibly that some people actually might consider downsizing from a house to a flat or an apartment to make it more affordable?
I do see that being a trend, and I already see it being a bit of a trend. I mean, on the back of lockdown and things, we had quite a lot of interest in 2- and 3-bedroom houses. Everybody wanted a garden. Do you mean that was a popular thing? And they are still popular. But and you said it all the way through, Jim. Keep your eye on flats. They'll become popular again, although they've always been a staple in the rental market. They'll become obviously popular again, and it's come around that they are going to start to be more sought after due to the fact that they're cheaper to look after and cheaper to heat and things, obviously with the cost of living and the energy crisis and things as well. So I do see that happening, but then you need to think if people start to move, obviously they're going to have, we've got the rental freeze at the moment, so the rental price that they've got at the moment is going to stay as it is for the foreseeable and until March anyway. But if they move, then they're going to have to take on a higher rent.
Already about the rental price staying and freezing, and why people and I've still not worked out why anybody's panicking about this, because a rental freeze in price in Scotland isn't neither here nor there, because the majority of landlords actually don't increase their rent for a tenant when they're in situ. So why would it bother anybody anyway? So, you know, wasting energy and time and effort and on the fear of, oh, I'm not able to increase my rents. But if we look at it in the past, we've never increased our rents anyway when a tenant's been in situ. So the rental freeze is immaterial in the scope of things. It's just a soundbite. It's almost like a political play in order to gain votes for the current government. That's all I could say. And you know,
it's a way of them displaying or make it we're doing something.
Oh, we're doing something, but you're not really doing anything because it was already. It's like saying, it's like saying, I tell you what, we'll give everybody, everybody that's over 90, and has one leg and is blind, 100,000 each to live on. Well, there's nobody like that anyway. So, so it's a kind of same. It falls. It maybe sounds great, but it falls on deaf ears really because it's not really worth the paper it's written on, and it makes no sense at all. So a rent freeze really until March next year is neither here nor there because it really doesn't affect anybody. And universal credit as well, it won't affect that either because they won't be able to legislate against universal credit and what the government actually, the UK government actually approves as well.
Yeah, and we demonstrated that last week, Jim, when we spoke, and we used your portfolio as an example and how often we've actually implemented rent increases over the years. And God, I think it was.
Well, I think we had come to the conclusion that inflation had gone up 43% since 2006, where I had my rent, and my rent for that same property had actually increased 28%. So, in actual fact, I was actually losing money in real terms according to the statistics. But when you take it as your rent's gone up 28%, everybody thinks that's a lot of money. But if your inflation's 43%, I'm actually losing. So rents are not going up as fast as people or as fast as the media and as fast as the governments make out to be over the longer period of time. They're going out in the short term, but that's how they choose to play it. Look at example inflation. Inflation dropped yesterday. Did anybody notice that?
I know you did. 19.
Inflation dropped yesterday slightly from the previous month. So overall, in headline inflation dropped. However, they chose to focus on food inflation actually higher in that micro bit, in that wee bit itself. And
rather than highlight the fact that actual inflation's lower.
But they don't want to come on the news and say inflation has actually dropped, do they? They want a headline. They want something to focus on that everybody's going to be fearful about. So in order to talk about them and share their news online, so they can get more adverts and get more advertising and get more revenue in. That's what that's designed to do. So we're getting played by the media, especially. The chronic, there's no doubt about it though. The chronic undersupply of rental homes has shown no sign of changing, which means that rents will continue to post above average growth rates into 2023, despite cost of living headwinds. Now, that's obviously not going to be the case for Scotland, but it will be because if you change tenancies, you're still entitled to increase your rent after the next tenancy. But it's supply and demand, isn't it? I don't think a government should dictate what you should be charging if somebody doesn't want to use it. So they can choose at the point of sale. It's like walking into a shop and saying, by the way, your pint of milk is only ever going to be £1. And when you get a new batch of pint of milks in, it's still going to be £1. But hold it, I'm paying £1.50 for the new pint of milk from the supplier. So I can't just pass it on to £1 anymore. And that's why the similar circumstances with the rentals, when they become empty and they become re-let, then the rent can actually be reviewed again. But again, it's supply and demand, whether the consumer wants to buy it at that rate or not. And if they don't, then that's fine. But the chronic undersupply I've suggested, and I've talked about it the other night, Richard, is also getting exacerbated by the fact that there is landlords out there, and I know that because we're on the forums all the time, saying that rather than actually going to re-let their house now, they've chosen to sell it. So in Fife, the housing stock for rent for private landlords has gone down 1,200 properties in the last 5 years. So there's now less properties for rent in the private rented market than there was 5 years ago. Now, that can only get worse. So how do we combat that? And that's, you know, that's another show. Let's not get into
that. That's a big
I'm going to
topic.
get on my high horse and I'm going to
That's
prove
a big
it.
topic to digress
Yeah,
with.
exactly. So let's look at the widening supply. Let's look at a wee graph here, which demonstrates what we just spoke about. So here is the 5-year rental demand. So 5-year rental demand versus 5-year average. You can see that there.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 2022 rental demand versus the 5-year average, 142% up. In 2021, it was 64% up. In 2020, it was 20% up. That's a startling statistic, isn't it, versus the 5-year average?
Yeah. Yeah, in comparison to the 5-year, I mean, that's...
Why on earth is that happening? I don't understand. However, look, stock of homes for rent versus 5-year average, above, hence the reason why you've only got 20% there. Then it restricts, it goes down. Now, there are people taking profits because the prices of houses have gone up now. Now they're exiting the market they're no longer renting. So 21% down, and then even more, 46% down. There is the problem. And it's the failure of the government to realise that and actually build additional housing and make sure there's housing in place to accommodate that shortage of supply. It's caused this problem overall. So a message to the Scottish Government, stop pointing the fingers at the private landlords, because it's not us that's caused this problem. It's your failure to deal with an adequate housing policy over the last 11 years you've been in power. Anyway,
and we went through that, Jim. We went through the actual stats for that. Was it last Wednesday?
Yes. So
midweek show.
The flow of new supply versus 5-year average. In 2020, it was 20% more. It was 2% less in 2021 and 7% less in 2022. So the flow of new supply, that's the number of properties coming into the market versus that. So the number of properties coming into market are actually declining. And then when we look at the year-on-year rental growth, the year-on-year rental growth is 0, 2%, and then 12% as well. Quite startling statistics, eh? The widening supply and demand imbalances drives rents higher. So rents accelerate in the face of chronic under supply shortage. Let's talk about this. So let me just talk about this in essence. Rental growth has accelerated over the last 12 months from an annual average rate of less than 2% in July 2021 to 12.3% today. Average rent increases throughout the UK by 115,000. By 115,000, good.
God, that would be something.
By 115 pounds per month since last year, to stand at 1,051 pounds per calendar month for the average rental property in the UK. Remember.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasise this is the whole of the UK and not just.
Could you give me a rough idea about what it is in Fife, Richard?
For the annual rental growth for
average rental in Fife. I mean, how much is it? How much is the average rental in Fife?
The average rental in Fife at the moment, I think, is about 720 something. I think it was when we looked.
Yeah, and that's because, is that getting skewed because we've got a lot of higher value properties in there? Is that,
again, when we look at Fife as a whole, we draw in areas like the East Newton, St Andrews, and think, do you know what I mean? Higher value properties. And the average, I think, I'd have to look at, I think it was about 723 or 725 or something was the average rental price, which people would think that's quite high. But you need to take into consideration areas like St Andrews and things are included in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that does skew it a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the fact that you do have student lets incorporated into there as well, as well as your mainstream areas where it's bigger value. And the average though, in most of the towns like Kirkcaldy, Clonrothes, and Leven and Dunfermline, you know, is that a lot less significantly?
It's not vastly less. I mean, we're doing 3-bedroom houses in areas like Glenrothes and Kirkcaldy for £650. Up to about, so when you saw that, I mean, it's not too far off what we're talking about, the average 3-bedroom house. But then obviously when you come into 2-bedroom flats and things, are around about the 550 mark and things. So in Kirkcaldy anyway.
Do you feel that as a proportion of somebody's income that's unsustainable? Let me just check that. Times 12 equals 7,800, and divide that by the average divide it by the average salary, which is about £30,000.
30,000, yeah.
It comes to about 26% of your income. Now, I know if something's 25%, no, I'm not going to say that because I don't know for that for definite. But I know 26% is still okay. I know when we were paying a mortgage in the 90s, in the early 90s and late 80s, it was about the mortgage was actually round about 36% of your income. So the rent here is only about 26% of the average income in terms of these areas. So it's still tolerable, still affordable. Yeah. It's just that people at the time have actually chosen to spend their money on other things like luxury items, like things that could be cut back on, which is about 15% of their income. We had done a previous statistical analysis of that, and we'd come to the analysis that 15% of the income in a household is actually going on luxuries.
Luxury, leisure, yeah.
Holidays, days out, theatre, cinema, restaurants, takeaways. Now, these are all things that could actually be easily cut back on. So that takes up about 15% of your income. Now, when you think about your rent is 25%, that's 15%, then you've accommodated for 25, 30, 40% of your income already. So where does the rest go? Food as well. So that's a significant part as well. But do you think the fact that rent is that so-called high, I mean, it's 25% of the income, is a barrier? Or is a problem right now? Do you think that because it's that level, it is a problem right now? In your opinion,
I don't think
it's feeding that back to you.
I don't feel like it's coming across as a problem. There are certain people who are being priced out of the market in certain areas. I have seen that happening. But like you say, Jim, it's not that a big proportion of the average salary. What I do think is people are obviously driving this, or maybe even the media driving this, like rents are through the roof and things. But really, when we've looked at it, they're really just being brought in line with the current market, and it's kind of making up for those years where it's not increased. I mean, like we looked at last week, there's so many properties that sat all this time.
All these years and years and years, I never had the media or the Scottish government coming on and talking about how rents are so low.
Yeah. And that's why I think now that things are getting brought in line,
landlords need to be helped out, and rents need to go up because these poor landlords can't afford it. No, I never saw anybody talking about that over all the successive years from the credit crunch, where it was almost peak rental levels, and then it dropped dramatically and never recovered for at least the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think in areas, in popular areas like Kirkcaldy, Glenrothes, Leven, throughout Fife that are really popular, even Cooper, I mean, rents have increased, but I think not beyond the realms of where people can't afford them.
It's still, I mean, the rental market still faces a chronic imbalance of supply and demand, doesn't it? And this has led to a surge in the rents, so-called surge, temporary, short-term surge, I would say. The stock of homes for rent remains almost half compared to the last 5 years available on the average. The average letting agent has just about 8 homes available for rent. What have we got?
Well, in total, we have got. I mean, I've got 8 available. Funnily enough, I've got 5 that we've just got
But we've no average.
No. Well, I've got 8 available. 5 I've just let agreed in the last week, so they're not available as such. And then I've got 2 commercial properties at the moment. But
so literally down to 3 properties available.
Sorry.
So we're down to 3 properties available.
No, I've got 8 available. I've got 5 that are sitting as let agreed.
That's 5 that have just been let.
Yeah.
All right. So
we've still got 8 available.
Yeah, so we had 13. I was about to say, let's all take a holiday next week.
No. I've got 13. I've actually got 15 sitting on the market, but 2 of them are commercials, 5 are let agreed, and 8 are available.
Yeah, okay, good. And then, so if there's people out there, I genuinely will say this, hand on heart, if you're out there and you're considering renting, please feel free to come to us. There's a huge shortage of supply just now for people, so we need to get people into houses and get them a roof over their head and security of tenure as well. Because, you get security of tenure now, don't you? Because you've got the PRT, which is no longer can you evict somebody through no fault eviction. That's been taken away years ago. And it's an open-ended lease, so the only way you can evict somebody is under one of the grounds, and most of these grounds now are discretionary rather than mandatory.
Yeah.
So again, it's up to the tribunal whether we actually go through that process and actually grant the eviction. So it's become a lot easier to enter the market for a tenant, and obviously become a lot easier for a tenant to exit the market. It's kind of a lot more challenging for a landlord, But in the majority of cases, in the vast majority, I'm talking about 99.1%, 99.9% actually, of cases, that all tenants pay their look after their property and pay their money on time, and they're not antisocial. And it's very, very few, and it's only the ones we get to see because they're highlighted, because they're problematic. The typical example is like the news and the media.
Yeah.
Okay, so the flow of new homes to rent is running 7% below the long-term average as renters stay put to avoid rent increases. At the same time, private landlords continue to sell homes to rationalise their portfolios in the face of tax and regulatory change. And this is what's caused. Let's look at the next one in the wee graph. It shows us this. So here we are here right now. And this is again, we can see the light purple there is January 22, April 22, July 22, 5-year average is the dark one as well. And it shows you, look at all the dark ones, way below the average. There's 5.2% annual earnings growth every single year here. And they're all the way below the 5-year average. Every single one of them's above. Here's Scotland here. So Scotland's just above there. And then in April, they went up. And then in July, they went up as well. And you know, I understand completely why the Scottish government is panicking, because they failed to have an adequate housing policy, and now they know it's going to hit the fan, and they've got no way out of it. The only way they could do is ask everybody to stop where they are and don't do anything, and until they take a breath. Effectively, the Scottish government is now drowning in their inadequate housing policy. Let's put it like that. And now the freezing of the rents and the moratorium on eviction now allows them to get up above the surface for a minute and actually take a breath. That's all this is allowing them to do, until they go back down into the mire, which they've created themselves, and they'll have to sort it out from there. This is what the problems they've been caused. I've got no qualms about saying that. If anybody's a politician and would like to come on and discuss this openly, I'm free, by the way, to talk about it, your inadequate housing policy. And I'll just refer to it as that before you come on. Okay, the signs that annual rental growth is close to peaking. Here we go, here's the signs. Rents are rising quickly across all parts of the UK, ranging from 7.6 in the northeast to almost 18% in London. While the annual growth rate has accelerated in the last year, it's starting to plateau. This is what I mean. This is exactly what happened with the house prices as well.
To level out.
Now it's all catching up, starting to level off. In London, the rental price growth pace is simply not sustainable. Current growth figures reflect it. Rents rebounding off a low base after a 10% fall during lockdown. That's what they failed to mention. There was a 10% fall during lockdown. Average rents in London are currently 7.8% higher than before the pandemic. So it's only 7.8, and yet they're trying to say it's 18.
18, yeah.
But it's actually 7.8 if you walk back to before the pandemic. So it's not that significantly more. Just remind me what inflation is. Oh, it's 10. So 7.8 versus 10. So in real terms, all the landlords in London are actually losing money.
Yeah.
So compared to the UK average of nearly 13% as well. So at the UK average, if inflation's at 10, they're at 13, then it's only UK average is only going up 3% in real terms. And you know, so let's put this all into perspective. Another important trend is rental growth in the urban areas across the England market, so 10.5%, which is outpacing that of the rural markets, 8.5%, as a strong employment growth drives demand in cities. There's no surprise there. We've got 1.3 million jobs and we've got 1.1 million people chasing them. This is exacerbating salary increases as well, as employers want to pay more to attract better talent. They've got no choice, and they want to pay more because they need to retain their existing talent, and this is what's driving it as well. This was not present when you think about it in previous rental increases. This other market as well, which was the employment market. So there is a correlation between the rental market, the prices in rental market versus the employment market. and where that is. There is a whether it's a strong correlation or not, I don't know, but I would say there is a correlation between that, and there is some sort of connection in there. High levels of new build supply concentrated around city centres also becoming more appealing to renters looking for smaller homes with lower running costs. So this is why it'll start to peter off as people begin to realise, wait a minute, I could actually go and buy a house because it's still more affordable to buy than actually rent. And we had actually discussed that on a previous show actually about, you know, will I wait for the property prices to drop? So if you wait 2 years, you're going to be paying rent for 2 years, and you're going to lose that money then if that's the case. So you may as well just invest in a mortgage now and buy a house now. So as one market, and this is always what happened before, Richard, as one market declined in the sales market, for example, the rental market boomed, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But just now we're seeing both markets actually increasing. But again, I think it's down to an inadequate housing policy. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, but we covered it time and time again about the inadequacy of housing that's available. And I think that, like you say, it's always been the trend that sales will go up and lettings will kind of come down, and then vice versa, lettings will go up as sales go down. But they seem to be kind of symbiotically over the last year rising. And I do think that's a direct reflection of the housing situation.
Yeah, and employment level has been so high as well.
Yeah.
And salary increases obviously are going to start matching that as well. And then we're going to pump 95 billion into the economy to actually stop the cap, the utilities rising over the next 2 years from October, which again will give people some sort of strength and resilience to say that, okay, I know where I'm budgeting wise. I don't need to worry about that. And that factor I have no control over, which is an undisclosed figure. When you look at it now, it is completely disclosed because it's been hedged by the UK government. I must admit, by the UK government, not the Scottish government.
Not the Scottish.
I'm not pro or against or anything like that. I'm just pointing out the facts here. That's all. So this isn't political. It's me pointing out exactly what's happening, where it's happening, and who's delivering what they're needing to deliver, and where it's coming from. All this money. So rent rises add to the cost of living squeeze. Do you want to talk about that a bit, Richard?
Yeah, I think while the pace of rent increases is starting to plateau, like you say, we looked at and said it was starting to level out. The question remains, how much higher can rents go? And this depends on how much headroom renters have to pay higher rents when they move home, and that's obviously what their situation is. Are they going to be available to pay the higher rent when they move to another property? And this can vary drastically given that the private rental market caters to a wide range of households and low and high incomes. Like I say, obviously, some people in some areas were being priced out of the market because they were on a lower income. A quarter of private renters receive housing benefit, and our recent report with Crisis examines the particular challenges for low-income renters who rely on that help to meet their housing costs. So
that's quite interesting because a lot more think tanks are now saying the housing benefit system is going to be the saviour of some of the landlords.
Yeah.
Because it's effectively it'll almost end up like guaranteed money.
Yeah.
You know yourself, as soon as you go one month and 1 day overdue from a tenant, you can immediately apply to universal credit and actually get paid the money paid direct to you.
Yeah, you could apply for the direct payment once you're at that stage.
I don't think even a lot of letting agents actually know that. And now the only reason I know that is because obviously, well, I was going to say obviously, but nobody knows that. Is I used to be the chairman of the National Landlord Association for Scotland, which is part of the UK's biggest landlord association. So I used to be their chairman, but there was a guidelines put out at the point with the DWP, which is the Department of Work and Pensions, which actually said in a guideline to every single person administering housing benefit at that time that because the tenancy is set up that you pay in advance for your rent, as soon as 1 month passes and you've not paid your rent, and 1 day after it you're due the next month's rent, they classify that as 2 months rent in arrears. And if you're 2 months rent in arrears, you can apply under law for direct payment of the mandate of universal credit, which is now the word for local housing allowance, which was previously the word for housing benefit. So that's why we know what we know, and we know how to do that to make sure it mitigates the losses to a landlord if that ever happens in that situation, rather than actually just keep them saying, the tenant's no paying, the tenant's no paying. It's like, well, we know exactly what to do and how to do it and how to head that off at the pass straight away.
You're right, Jim, and I think not just landlords, a lot of agents out there won't be aware of this, and it's a brilliant way, like you say, if times become difficult and you've got a tenant who's in receipt of benefits, or obviously house benefit, universal credit, whatever it may be, you can do the direct payment, and it's guaranteed rent, basically.
I don't blame them, Richard, honestly. And it was a classic example we used to use all the time, is if a tenant's on universal credit and they're getting money paid towards their housing benefits, their housing costs, and you're paying it into their hands every single month, and it's their responsibility to pass it on to you as the landlord or the letting agent. It's difficult to justify that if you're needing new shoes for your children.
Yeah, and I think that's where...
And I get that straight away, and the most difficult time is difficult to justify that as well. And there's often a case where, we have had it in Christmas as well, where it's like, I've got nothing, I need, and it's like, well, okay, but these costs are for your housing, they're not for your living. And you're supposed to pass them on to us for that reason. So it's a difficult decision for some people, a very few minority, to actually say to them, God, it's like £500. It's like, that's almost what I get every month. And I'm getting that from my housing costs. And the temptation to use that for something other than your housing costs is pretty high when you're on the breadline. So I don't get that, and that's why it's important. Why you have to be able to head that off at the pass as a letting agent or a landlord, in case it does happen for the first time, so it doesn't happen the next time.
Yeah, I mean, it never used to be the case when it was just housing benefit. We would have people agree and willingly agree at the beginning of the tenancy, I don't even want to see the rent, just have it paid straight to you and that's it. But obviously with universal credit coming through, automatically it goes straight to the tenant. And like you say, if people are at that end of the market and obviously struggling with making ends meet, then it's quite difficult for them to part with that, although they should be, because it's not for that purpose. However, they do use it for other stuff.
If you can demonstrate to universal credit from the beginning that the tenant has a problem with money and handling money, and they've previously had that problem with money, universal credit will pay it direct to you straight away. And we're aware of that as well, and what procedures in order to do that. So again, that's another way to make sure that everything's done properly and make sure the landlord is protected equally. More importantly, make sure the tenant's protected.
It is, but I just got to say it protects the tenant as well.
Yeah, of course, because it keeps a roof over their head. Because if you've got a landlord that needs to pay their bills and they have no rent coming in, then they can't pay the bills. Therefore, you know what happens next? If they've got no more money, it's repossession route. And then therefore the property is taken off the market, the tenant's evicted, and they've got nowhere to go. And that's one less property out of the rental market in a market which is extremely difficult just now for supply. So you don't want that to happen. So that's a case of making sure that the tenant is protected and looked after, and that's a good way to do it. Typical pattern of affordability.
Yeah, I was just going to say this kind of highlights what I was just talking about earlier. So the typical pattern of rental affordability, it does vary by location and income level. Now, just stress again, this is obviously, like, it refers to the UK as a whole, and this is like the latest English housing survey from 2020 to 2021 asked renters how easy or difficult they find rental costs. Now, 3/4 of private... Sorry?
Yeah, I've got that graph while you're talking.
So 3/4 of private renters said they found rental payments very or fairly easy, while 25% found them fairly or very difficult to pay. So there's a big difference there. So that's 3/4 to a quarter. So 3/4 of them find it easier or fairly easy, as opposed to a quarter who maybe struggle a wee bit more.
So you can see that there. I mean, everything that's in purple is the ones that find it difficult to pay their rent. Every other one, and in the black itself, actually finds it pretty straightforward to pay their rent. So it is a very, very restrictive.
In comparison, it's a small minority.
Whereas everybody thinks everybody's not able to pay their rent. In actual fact, that's not the case when the survey's been done. And that's off the northern, the Midlands, the south, and the London, and then also the lowest income people. Look, still 2/3 of people in the lowest income bracket actually said they found it was easy for them to pay their rent. The middle income bracket was again about over 2/3. found it easy, and the highest income bracket about 8 to 7%, which is quite high. You would expect that anyway. Found theirs easy as well. But it just shows you there's the impression given out there that everybody finds it difficult to pay the rent, when in actual fact it's not the case when they're asked.
Yeah, and I mean that doesn't surprise me. With the lowest income people, typically the property that they're in, their local housing allowance that they're granted will cover, if not be more than what their rent is, and we demonstrated that last week.
It's the marginal people you've got to worry about, though.
Yes.
It's the people with the lowest incomes, but they don't get the help from the universal credit. There's a fine line where the crossover from getting help to not getting help, and the marginal gain by not getting help is a lot less than what it is with getting help, if that makes sense. Probably a classic example of that, Richard. I only remember it as I was a student. So when I was a student, I had to contribute 20% towards my rent, even though I'm not earning anything, and I didn't have any money coming in. If I was unemployed, it would be paid for me 100%. And yet, with being a student, I was actually learning to educate myself to further better myself.
For the betterment of yourself, to then obviously contribute to the
and I scratched my head often and thought, and it's still the same system today. It's because you're not available for work if you're at college. Therefore, they won't give you as much help because of that reason. How absurd is that?
That is absurd, because I mean, without educating yourself to obtain a better job or a better position, how else are you going to do it? So it's a catch-22, and that's why a lot of people feel a bit disheartened when they're in that position. But it's
that's why, and you almost get people who are caught in a poverty trap because of the benefit system and the way it's created, and it doesn't. There's nothing to give them that transitional leap, where they can actually get out of that and get onto the proper earning ladder, and help them support that. Most people that are unemployed and are getting help want to get out of that and want to go out and work and want to provide something and want to do something. But the difficulty of that is because their education level isn't that high, they can only get jobs which can pay minimum wage, and that's where it doesn't kick in anymore, any help.
Because the position they're already in is more beneficial.
High rental costs, which are paid for the government already and subsidised by the government, and they've got doesn't allow them to take that leap and actually be not better off, but even where they are right now in terms of income, they actually sets them back on their journey. And people say, well, you've got to struggle and all the rest of it. It's like, that's all very well, but the system rewards people to stay where they are.
Yeah, it does, and a lot of people in that position, they look at their circumstances and feel like it's more beneficial for them to stay where they are and do what they're doing.
So, together with own data on rent affordability, do we believe that further headroom for above average growth in the less expensive areas of the UK? Do you think there's probably.
Yeah. Sorry, you lost me there because you moved on.
It's all right. I'm talking in general. I'm just thinking what's your thoughts on that? I mean, rent rising faster at the top end of the market.
I was just going to say, let's look at rents at the top end of the market, and it's another important consideration for rental affordability, is whether rental growth is being driven at the top end or the bottom end of the market. Asking rents for 2-bedroom flats are rising faster at the top end, with about 25% of the market, with growth lagging across the bottom 25% of the market, where demand is more price sensitive. For a 3-bedroom house, there is less of a difference, but in many regions, the asking rents and the more affordable segments are rising fast. And as a rented family, a home becomes less attainable, demand for 2-bedroom flats continues to climb, and that's what we spoke about at the beginning, and we spoke about that previously leading up to this, Jim, as well.
With renters looking for better value for money, but more importantly, landlords getting better returns as well.
Yeah.
Because the flats, and as I did my UK house price update this morning, flats are still quite low in comparison to terraced houses, semi-detached and detached. Yeah. In actual fact, a flat is like about a quarter, maybe a third, or a quarter to a third of the price of a detached house on average. So it makes it far better for somebody as an investor to buy the flat and actually rent it to someone and make it absolutely beautiful inside for them, and it's more affordable for them, but it's a better return for the investor landlord as well.
Yeah, I've seen some really nice 2-bedroom flats or apartments, if you want to call them that. We've done a show about flats and apartments as well, but done to a really high standard, and they're achieving really reasonably good rental values, which aren't too out the box, but are such a good return for what they're picking the property up for.
Do you think more and more times we're going to become more and more European? Because, you know, Europe and all that in America, they all live in apartments and flats.
Yeah, and I think as we move forward, that people are going to start to choose to rent a lot more and choose the flats and apartments.
Yeah. What about rents rising for far more slowly for non-movers? You know, where are we with that?
Well, obviously, for non-movers at the moment, we've got the rent freeze, so that's not going to change the rental price at the moment. But the average renter moves every 4 years. So our new lets index shows the experience. This is obviously Zoopla's index. The experience of 25% of renters moving and renting a new home. So the ONS rental index tracks the rental growth across all rented homes, including data on households who are moving as well as those remaining in their current property. So it shows the current rent across all rented homes are 3.7% higher compared to July 2021. So like a year ago. That's this graph here.
So this is the Office of National Statistics. Collate this. This is all the statistics from all the areas and the letting agents and that. And this shows you the top one there, which is that 3.7, is it? No, the 3.2% is the UK rental index on all homes, right? Is 3.2%. Is that right? Yep. And the 3.7% there is the UK rental index excluding London.
Excluding London. It's all homes excluding London at 3.7.
And Zoopla UK rent index for new lets is the thick purple line, which is 12.3%.
12.3%.
Yeah, and that's because as people are reletting, they're obviously reviewing the rents.
They're reviewing the rents.
It's only you know what's driven this forward. What's driven this forward, Richard, is really the interest rate rises. Now landlords are looking at it and they're actually saying to themselves, look, if base rates are going to go up, my financing is going to go up. Therefore, when I now relet a property, which is where that 12.3% is coming from, I'm now going to have to review my rent. Now, I've had my rent historically low for the last 10 years, so I'm going to have to put up quite a bit. Now, this is my argument all the time where I keep saying to people, if you should be reviewing your rent as an investor landlord every single year and maybe putting up 1 or 2%. And the reason for that is not to be greedy. That's not what the whole point is, not to get more money. The reason for that is to introduce any rent increases over a smoother period or a longer term than actually saying to someone, by the way, your rent's going up 12%.
Do small changes year on year rather than...
And that allows, because obviously inflation goes up and costs go up, therefore the landlord's able to reinvest back in the property to look after the tenant. After all, when a boiler goes, you know, a boiler years ago to fit was £1,000. Now a boiler today is 2,200. So there's a huge difference in costs. Where does that come from? It clearly has to come from the rent. It can't, you know, the landlord's not there as a registered charity just to put his hand in his pocket and say, there you go. And equally, either as a housing association and either as the council as well. So, you know, you have to sustain a business and you have to make what we call profit. Housing associations call it a surplus. So you have to make a surplus over and above in order to reinvest back into the stock, into the housing, in order to look after the tenant. That's simple practice. Also, you have to take into account, well, some tenants actually trash houses and they actually don't pay for it. So therefore, you have to take that money and you have to reinvest that back in. And that's what I keep saying to people. If a tenant doesn't pay my rent, I don't lose out because I don't take the rent out anyway. The only person that loses out is another tenant, because what happens is they don't get a kitchen or a bathroom earlier than they thought. That's all, because that's all that pays for. So if I lose £5,000 if somebody moves out and just does a runner, the only person that loses out is the next person that moves in, or another tenant somewhere else, because that money has to come from somewhere else in order to pay for that. It is a business after all, and we're in the business of looking after people. We're in a service-based business. We're not in the business of houses. We're in a service-based business. We're looking after people. And then to pay people like yourselves. You know, if you want to make sure you're professionally looked after, then you go to a letting agent to actually manage to rent the property from, because they'll manage it as well at the same time. So you're not constantly asking a landlord who keeps saying to you, or a self-managed landlord who keeps saying to you, I'm busy at work now, could you call me later on? It's like, aye, but there's water pissing out everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, or there's an electrical wire and it's frayed and it's live. It's like, or there's a gas leak. Aye, but can I phone you later on once I've finished my work? What good is that? That's why you have a professional letting agent to do that for you. That's why we endorse that all the time. So that's that graph that we discussed.
Yeah, the graph, and I think
you see that, and it shows you. And then the last one there is the UK Zoopla rent index, excluding London.
Excluding London, yeah.
Okay. So that puts things into perspective about why that is so much. But when you look at right across the board, though, there, Richard, rents are only really rising about 3.7% since July.
Yeah.
See that? So there. And then we've got July 2016. And 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So they've only ever increased a small amount each year. They've not had huge increases like we've expected.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Renters are actually seeking smaller homes. We've actually talked about this, and the lower running costs are leading. Zoopla's leading edge data on rental demand shows that the renters are responsible for rising rents, responding to rising rents and cost of living pressures by shifting their focus into smaller homes, primarily 2-bedroom flats. Actually, we've seen they've seen a steady reduction in the proportion of renters looking for 2- and 3-bedroom houses, and an increase in the demand for 1- and 2-bedroom flats over 2021 to 2022. This trend has been accelerating in the recent weeks, they're actually saying. Now, they'll see it firsthand because they're seeing it straight onto their websites, aren't they? They'll see the number of hits getting onto properties. The shift in demand partially reflects localised changes in supply, but the overriding impact reflects affordability and the cost of living concerns. Outside London, the current difference in rents charged for a 2-bedroom flat and a 3-bedroom house is £105 per month, as I said in the headline, economic indicators, which translates into £1,260 per year in rental costs, in additional rental costs. It's not just the rental cost shaping demand, though. Lower running costs of smaller homes will also have a growing appeal to these exact same people.
And that's where the 2-bed flat popularity comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at this wee graph we've got here. Here we go. Here. So this actually looks at 1-bedroom flats, 2-bedroom houses and 3-bedroom houses as we go through. Renter demand shifts to 2-bedroom flats, better value, lower running costs. So here we go. There's 2020, 21, 2022, and then July to August right now. So you can see that 1-bed flats are starting to increase in demand, the share of demand. 2-bed flats are starting to increase, and you can see the 2-bedroom houses and the 3-bedroom houses going down as well.
Yeah.
So with that in tow right now, what should people be investing in? 1- and 2-bedroom flats.
2-bedroom flats.
I would actually safely say, I would say to people mostly, you should invest in possibly a 2- or a 3-bedroom flat. A 3-bedroom flat's nice because it gives somebody maybe a home office to work on and have 2 bedrooms for their for children or visiting children or maybe grandchildren. So that, and plus the fact, you could always rent a 3-bedroom flat at a 2-bedroom rate if you have to, whereas you can't rent a 1-bedroom flat at a 2-bedroom rate if you have to. So you've got nowhere else to go with a 1-bedroom flat except 1-bedroom flat, and it's a limited market because you'll have most people wanting 2-bedroom flats. So I would always say go for 2- and 3-bedroom flats if you're in apartments, if you're going for anything. But I would say predominantly flats. It's, lower value, better standard inside.
I think that's the important thing as well. I mean, people might look at 2-bedroom flats or 2- or 3-bedroom flats and be obviously attracted by the price point and then what they could potentially get in return. But you're only going to get that return if you've got it to a good standard. And that's the important thing. Yeah.
And I always say the good benchmark is that if you would live in the flat yourself once you've finished it, then it's ready for rent.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't live in that flat yourself once you've finished it, it's not yet ready for rent. You need to finish it to the standard you want, within reason, remember. Because obviously you wouldn't put, I mean, standard if somebody else wants is like, I want a German kitchen and all the rest of it. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. Mid-market kitchen, I would say, mid-range kitchen.
You get a lot of mid-range appliances,
mid-range one. Yeah. Nice one out of maybe Magnet, B&Q,
B&Q do quite a good ones now.
Yeah, B&Q's really good. I've actually changed from Howden's to B&Q recently. And I do get someone to install Magnet kitchens, a contractor who actually just does it all for me from start to finish. And we don't get involved in it at all. They just do it and project manage it. So here's the next thing. Rising energy costs are adding to shift in rental demand.
Yeah.
Well, why is that? In addition to the rental payments, running costs and energy bills are lower for flats than houses. Especially new build rented properties and apartments, which have a much higher energy efficiency rating. The amount of gas it takes to heat and run a purpose-built flat over 12 months is 40% lower. 40%. It's like for every £1,000, you're saving 400 quid.
Yeah, I mean that's better than half.
Yeah, that's crazy. So when you look at the 2,500 capped rate, if you went from a house to a flat on average, then you would be saving 40%, 200,
about 900 quid.
£1,000.
Yeah,
effectively £1,000, I think it is. So you'd be saving £1,000 of that. So your bill for a flat would be 1,500 as opposed to 2,500 if it was on that capped rate. So that's in comparison to a terraced house, and it's 25% lower for a converted flat. A one-bed home requires less than half of the gas that's needed for a three-bedroom home. That's 50% less.
Yeah.
So again, that will come down significantly. While a D and E rated homes require 25% to 48% more gas compared to a C rated home. That's a big jump. Hence the reason why the Scottish government, and I will call them out on that for being, progressive towards that, making sure that all new rental properties, which are going to have to be C by 2025, for the existing ones, and
2028.
2028 is for what, sorry?
For existing tenancies.
Oh, existing. But all new ones in 2025 will have to be C. Yeah, okay. Cost of living pressures build. Renters will be looking to balance the combined impact of renting and running costs as they make home moving decisions. We expect the appeal of apartments and flats and the energy efficient houses to set a rise further in 2023 as people move into them. The calls for rent controls. Do you want to cover this?
Yeah, okay. I mean, and the periods of fast rental growth, which obviously we are experiencing fast rental growth, but we've explained why that is, because there hasn't been any for a long time. But the topic of controlling or moderating rents has often comes to the fore. So some countries and cities and governments have tools to control rent increases, and this helps them manage the affordability. The Scottish Government has announced plans to control rents to ease the cost of living pressures. There are many formats for these controls, often with the rent set at the market rate upfront and then successive increases linked to the rate of the consumer price inflation or wage growth. So obviously they need to look at it in comparison to obviously how wages and inflation is growing alongside that, which we've just spoke about recently isn't really happening. The focus of the UK government is the taxation of landlords and regulations to improve standards of rental housing. Rather than controlling rents, UK landlords have some of the toughest tax treatments, and the upcoming rental reform bill in England will improve the standard of homes, but will also increase costs further for landlords. So, against the regulatory backdrop, talk of possible rent controls will simply push more landlords to exit the sector, worsening the supply issue and ultimately cause rents to increase.
Yeah, I'm about to call bullshit out in the government, by the way, and I'll tell you why. Affordability in line with the long-term running average. Here we go right now. Look at this.
Yeah.
Since 2009, here we go. There's the long-term running average, 33%, and there's the affordability since 2009. It's been exactly the same, if not under the long-term average. So the word is bullshit to the government saying that people can't afford their rents, because this clearly indicates that is not the case, and it's always been affordable in terms of the long-term running average. You maybe pick out sound bites and individual people that will come on the news and tell you they can't afford their rent because they've not got two halfpennies to rub together. But the reality is, in essence, in the scope of the majority, everybody can afford it, and it's still extremely affordable in comparison to what it is on the long-term average since 2009. So the word to the government is bullshit. You're lying again to suit your purpose. At the UK level of affordability rent is broadly in line with the long-term average, run average. The chart I've just shown demonstrates that affordability is still well below the 2015 mark. With rental growth looking to have plateaued, we expect, Zoopla expects the measure of affordability to flatten out over the next few quarters. Affordability is a major challenge in many households, especially with those on lower incomes. This is not affordability of rent, remember. This is because they can't afford utilities and food. And it's like the government's blaming the people that are renting for that and asking them to contribute towards that in some sort of way by rent controls. A recent work with the Crisis, whose Zoopla's done recently, demonstrated a gap between housing benefit payments and market rents, outlining the case for a re-rated benefit payments to support the supply of affordable private rented homes. In addition, so they're thinking about increasing the housing benefit payments. By all means, you can increase it if you want, but to be honest, they're fine for me.
They're fine at the level they are at the moment.
And if you increase it, you know what's going to happen. I'll just give people more. I'll just put it back in. In addition to the levels of rent, it's important that policymakers focus on the supply side problems in the rented sector. That's the government. The long-term housing policy has failed miserably. UK and Scottish, by the way, as the two are inextricably linked. Now, we need, this is where they say Zoopla needs to ensure policies and regulations, and we need to ensure policies and regulations are there to encourage as many decent landlords as possible to remain in the sector. We need them to remain in the sector. You cannot lose the private landlords. The whole of the Edinburgh financial services sector would be wiped out if you lost all the private landlords in Edinburgh, because that's what sustains everybody. It works in these industries. So you need that market. You can't just do that overnight. Otherwise, the market will start to decline in size, causing rents to increase again. Quickly, you want to review the outlook for the rest of the year in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, the outlook for the rest of 2023, there is no real prospect of a significantly improved rental supply in the near term, which obviously we're not surprised about, as private landlords continue to sell off homes and renters stay put for longer. Higher mortgage rates will compound the pressure on demand, making it harder for would-be first-time buyers to stop renting and purchase their home or their first home. The imbalance in supply and demand is here to stay, and rents will continue to rise above average levels into 2023 across the more affordable markets. There is a headroom for some renters to pay more, especially outside of London and the southeast, where rental affordability will remain a drag on demand. Now, remember, when we talk about this as UK as a whole, but I think it's all relevant as we go through.
We are expecting rental growth to slow over the Q4, which is coming up and into 2023, but it's unlikely to happen extremely quickly. And this is because of, again, I'll come back to saying the failure of the governments to have an adequate housing policy, and seem to think that this is the saving grace to just pick on us. Okay, thanks for coming on the show, Richard. Really appreciate that. Any final words on this before we finish off?
Yeah, I think although there is a bit of hype about rental prices are through the roof, and there is a shortage of property, I think we've demonstrated that the majority of people at both ends of the market aren't struggling with the rent at the levels that they are. They have increased. People just think it's a vast increase because rents have not changed for so long. But I think as things are, as I've just said there, this trend of lack of supply will continue into 2023.
My final thoughts are, if you're a tenant out there and you are genuinely struggling with your rent, please speak to your landlord, speak to your letting agent, speak to your letting agent as well. Make sure, because after all, they're there to help you. We want people to stay in their tenancy as long as possible. It makes it really easy for us as well, and to look after you as well, and it doesn't cause any hassle. That's all we want, and that's what everybody wants. So nobody's going to immediately say, if you come to us and say, or any decent landlord, any decent letting agent, which is the majority of them, if you come to them and say, look, I'm going to struggle, is there a way around this? Can we work with this? By all means, approach them and say that, because they should be welcome you with open arms and communicate with you properly. So that's the most important thing as a tenant you should take away. Do not bury your head in the sand. Do not do anything else, because you'll just back the landlord into a corner, and they'll have no option but eviction. That's it. When it comes along in March, they'll have no option but to do that. So hopefully that's given everyone a great insight into the rental UK market right now, and also how it applies to Fife and overall and housing policy. And we'll see you later. Bye bye for now.